I never thought I'd be the type of person who would lie to their spouse. My parents raised me to believe honesty was the cornerstone of any relationship. Yet there I was, crafting elaborate stories for Michael about where I was going 3 nights a week. The guilt gnawed at me constantly, but I kept telling myself it was for the best. That's what desperation does to you. It warps your moral compass until you hardly recognize yourself. It started 6 months ago. Michael lost his job at the engineering firm where he'd worked for 12 years. The company downsized, shipping his department's responsibilities overseas. At first, we weren't worried. With his experience and connections, finding a new position shouldn't have been difficult. But weeks turned into months, and his growing frustration turned into a simmering depression. Our savings dwindled. The mortgage payments loomed. Michael's unemployment benefits wouldn't cover our expenses indefinitely. I took extra hours at the hospital where I worked as a nurse, but it wasn't enough. The rejection letters piled up on Michael's desk, each one chipping away at his self-worth. "I'll find something soon," he'd say, his voice hollow. "I just need a little more time." That's when I saw the ad in our local community college bulletin. Paid participants needed for pharmaceutical trial. 3 evenings per week, 8 weeks total. $8,000 compensation upon completion. The money would give us breathing room, enough to cover 3 mortgage payments and some breathing space, while Michael continued his job search. I called immediately and scheduled an appointment. The trial involved testing a new anxiety medication. The researchers needed subjects with no history of mental health issues as a control group. The side effects seemed minimal: possible drowsiness, mild headaches, dry mouth. I qualified easily and signed the paperwork the same day. But I couldn't tell Michael. His pride was already wounded, and knowing I was subjecting myself to an experimental drug trial to keep us afloat would devastate him. So I lied. I told him I'd picked up evening shifts at a different hospital. The deception came easier than I expected, each fabrication building upon the last. "They're desperate for experienced nurses," I explained. "The pay is better, too." Michael was too consumed by his own struggles to question me. He'd mumble a distracted goodbye when I left for my shift, sometimes not even looking up from his laptop, where he endlessly revised his resume and scoured job boards. The pharmaceutical company paid in cash, which I deposited in small amounts to avoid raising questions. Our financial situation stabilized, but the distance between Michael and me grew. Each lie was another brick in the wall separating us. I never imagined those 8 weeks would lead us to a courtroom, with my husband staring at me from across the aisle, his eyes filled with betrayal and confusion. Week 5 of the trial, everything changed. I noticed subtle shifts in my body, persistent headaches that painkillers couldn't touch, tremors in my hands that made starting IVs at work nearly impossible, and moments of disorientation where I'd find myself staring blankly at a wall, unable to recall what I was doing. The researchers assured me these were expected variations in response and encouraged me to continue. I should have listened to my instincts. Instead, I listened to our bank account. The morning it happened, I was already late for work after oversleeping due to what I now recognize was medication-induced fatigue. I rushed through breakfast, swallowed my trial pill with a gulp of coffee, and kissed Michael goodbye. He was preparing for his first in-person interview in months, his face freshly shaven, eyes bright with cautious hope. "Knock him dead," I said, squeezing his hand. "Tonight, we'll celebrate." The last thing I remember is pulling out of our driveway. According to witnesses, I ran a red light at 45 miles per hour and T-boned an SUV carrying a mother and her 2 children. The police report stated I never applied the brakes. Miraculously, no one died. The mother suffered a broken collarbone and concussion. Her children escaped with minor cuts and bruises. I wasn't so lucky, for broken ribs, a punctured lung, and a traumatic brain injury that kept me in a medically induced coma for 6 days. When I finally opened my eyes, Michael was there, haggard and unshaven. Relief flooded his face, quickly followed by confusion when the doctor mentioned the experimental drug metabolites found in my blood work. "What drug trial?" Michael asked, his voice breaking. "Sarah works evening shifts at Memorial." The doctor's puzzled expression said everything. The lies unraveled rapidly after that. The pharmaceutical company's lawyers arrived before I was even fully conscious, pressure mounting to sign liability waivers. They argued I had violated the trial agreement by driving within 2 hours of taking the medication, a restriction buried in page 17 of the consent forms I'd hastily signed. Michael discovered everything: the trial, the money, the fictitious job. His job interview, which he'd apparently aced, became an afterthought in the chaos that followed. He moved out of our bedroom the day I came home from the hospital, sleeping on the couch while I recovered upstairs, our communication reduced to terse exchanges about medication schedules and doctor appointments. The woman I injured, Elena Vasquez, filed a civil suit against me and the pharmaceutical company. Her attorney argued that the company had failed to adequately screen participants and monitor for adverse reactions, while I had negligently operated a vehicle while impaired. My entire life became measured in legal terms: plaintiff, defendant, liability, negligence. The pharmaceutical company offered Elena a settlement, contingent upon my testimony supporting their claim that I had violated protocol. Their lawyers coached me relentlessly, rehearsing answers designed to protect their client, while placing the blame squarely on my shoulders. Just stick to the script, the lead attorney instructed the day before the trial. Remember, you signed the forms. You knew the risks. What they didn't know was that Michael had found a whistleblower, another trial participant who had experienced similar symptoms and reported them, only to have his concerns dismissed. This participant had secretly recorded conversations with the research team acknowledging the drug's concerning side effect profile. As I took the stand that morning, Michael sat in the back of the courtroom, our eyes meeting briefly before I looked away. The weight of my deception pressed down on me as I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the very thing I had failed to do with the person I loved most. Mrs. Collins, can you please tell the court why you participated in the Xenopharm trial? The company's attorney smiled reassuringly, following our carefully rehearsed questioning. Financial reasons, I replied, my voice barely carrying across the hushed courtroom. My husband had lost his job. And did you understand the restrictions outlined in the consent form regarding operating motor vehicles? I hesitated, feeling the weight of Elena Vasquez's gaze from the plaintiff's table. Her arm was still in a sling. Behind her sat Michael, his expression unreadable. Yes, I lied, just as we had practiced. I understood I shouldn't drive within 2 hours of taking the medication. Yet you chose to drive that morning, correct? I did. The attorney nodded, satisfied. No further questions, Your Honor. Elena's attorney approached next, a sharp-eyed woman with a reputation for thorough cross-examinations. Mrs. Collins, how thoroughly did the research team explain the potential side effects of the trial medication? They provided a list in the consent form. Did they specifically discuss with you the risk of sudden disorientation or loss of consciousness? I glanced toward the Xenopharm representatives. Their lead attorney gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. They mentioned possible drowsiness, I said carefully. Mrs. Collins, I have here the medical records from your hospital stay, which indicate you reported experiencing tremors and periods of disorientation in the days leading up to the accident. Did you report these symptoms to the research team? Yes, I admitted. At my week 5 check-in. And what was their response? They said it was normal. Expected variations. Did they suggest you discontinue the trial or adjust your dosage given these concerning symptoms? No. They encouraged me to continue. The attorney produced a document. I'd like to enter into Evidence Exhibit C, an email exchange between Xenopharm's research director and their legal department, dated 3 weeks before Mrs. Collins' accident. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. This wasn't in our preparation. Mrs. Collins, were you aware that 3 other participants had reported similar symptoms and one had experienced a workplace accident? No, I whispered, my pulse quickening. I wasn't told that. I could see the Xenopharm attorneys shifting uncomfortably. Elena's lawyer continued mercilessly, presenting evidence that the company had deliberately downplayed risks and ignored warning signs to keep the trial on schedule. Then she asked the question that changed everything. Mrs. Collins, given what you know now, do you believe you were fully informed of the risks you were taking? I looked at Elena, thinking of her children who nearly lost their mother. I looked at the Xenopharm representatives, their faces tight with warning. Finally, I looked at Michael, who had suffered through my deception only to stand by me despite everything. In that moment, I realized I had a choice: continue the pattern of lies that had brought us here or finally embrace the truth, whatever the consequences. No, I said clearly, my voice suddenly strong and steady. I was not informed. The company knew about the risks and concealed them. They told me to keep driving, keep working as normal despite my symptoms. When I expressed concerns, they dismissed them and reminded me of the final payment. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order as Xenopharm's attorneys jumped to their feet in protest. Furthermore, I continued when silence returned. They coached me to lie today about understanding the driving restrictions. That section was added to my consent form after the accident. I have my original copy at home without that clause. The judge's gavel came down hard. Mrs. Collins, do you understand the seriousness of what you're alleging? Yes, Your Honor. I've lived with lies long enough. My deception hurt my husband and nearly destroyed my marriage. Their deception could have killed someone. The trial continued for 3 more days, but that moment of truth changed everything. Elena's case was settled for an amount that covered all her medical expenses and hardship. Xenopharm faced criminal charges for falsifying research data and consent documents. As for Michael and me, the road to rebuilding trust has been long and painful. We started with weekly counseling sessions, where I finally explained my desperate need to protect him from feeling like a failure. He shared how my lies made him feel like a stranger in his own marriage. 6 months later, he's working at a new firm, and I've reduced my hours at the hospital. We're learning to communicate honestly, even when the truth is difficult. Some nights, we still lie awake with the weight of what happened between us. But we're together, facing whatever comes next with open eyes and honest hearts. Sometimes the hardest person to be truthful with is the one you love most. But as I learned in that courtroom, the truth, however painful, is ultimately the only path forward. I appreciate you watching till the end. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more content.